right, it is 2 o'clock Eastern. So we're going to kick things off here. I'm Betsy Scott. I'm the Executive Director of Programs and Engagement for the Alliance. Welcome to today's Third Tuesday event. Excited about this topic. Have to give a shout out on this front to Laura Dwyer of DuPont. She actually suggested, she'd been hearing a lot of rumblings going on with partners of theirs in the industry and thought this might be a good topic for us to dig into, and we certainly agreed with her. We have a great group of people here today to connect with. We'd like to make this as conversational as possible, even though we're in a webinar format. For those of you who've been to one of our events before, when we have roundtables where we're sitting around a table and we're given a couple of questions or a bigger area to discuss as a smaller group and noodle those questions, that's kind of how we've modeled today's event. So Paige, if you wouldn't mind stopping, or actually click to the next one first, and then we'll open it so everybody can see everyone, bigger screen when we do introductions. But in contrast to sitting next to somebody's table at a bigger event, you have the opportunity throughout this event to go into the chat function and make sure it says everyone, so that not just the panelists but the entire group can see, and share any additional insights or questions that you might have on this front. We are looking at, thinking differently about the supply chain today. How do we deal with some of the issues that we're facing in terms of material availability, in terms of labor availability and logistical issues and so forth? And are there alternative construction strategies, materials we should be using? How can we combat some of these issues? So we've invited a few different perspectives to the table. So first, we'll do quick intros of all the builder and construction service material solution providers, kind of bucketed you guys in there. CR, as most people know, from Meritage Homes, is going to represent the national builder perspective. He has an unusual role in which his job is all about innovation. There's not a whole lot of those in the industry. And he's looking at scalability, performance, and value for both the customers and the shareholders of Meritage as a bigger builder. So fortunate to have him on that front. And you've been chatting on the side a bit, I think, with Corey from an innovation perspective. So Corey Donahue's with Bettr Homes. He's their co-founder, and he also is the leader of SI Panels. This is the one day my husband has chosen to work away from home, so the dogs might make an appearance. But he has an experience as an affordable, zero energy ready home builder. He's using SIPS panels, and he's also helping other people deliver housing with those panels, as well as a former real estate investor in the single family home for rental space. So a good perspective he'll offer as both a service provider and a housing provider. And then Emanuel has a similar background in that he is a recovering wood builder for Toll Brothers and Orleans Homes. And he's going to talk about steel as an alternative as both the home builder with Broadstreet Homes in the Carolinas, as well as a turnkey solution provider for build for rent. So that's our builders construction services providers. And then on the third party quality and performance side, we've got Rich Baker with IBACOS. And Rich works with production home builders, providing innovation and quality management perspective on all aspects of design and construction, from advanced building envelopes, energy systems integration, forensics, and more. And then Blake Gustafson, last but not least, from STRAND. He has a structural engineering lens with extensive experience in commercial and residential project design and management, a strong focus in single family, including resiliency, which is certainly a huge issue for us to be considering as we look at material strategies. So I think a great group of folks to kind of round things out, and really appreciate you guys participating today. And we're going to start with some broader questions. Asked this of people beforehand, before today's event, but I think it's still worth noting, if we talk at the top level, what do you guys think is the biggest challenge or opportunity for innovation that we're facing in the supply chain today? And I'm going to go to Corey first, because Corey went last, and when we talked about this last week, and unfortunately, some people stole his thunder. So what are your thoughts on that front, Corey? You might be freezing up. Hey, we're going to go over to CR because Corey's freezing up for a minute, and then we'll circle back to you, Corey.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is I steal Corey's information all the time, right? I mean, that's if you're in innovation, your job is to take the smartest people in the room and take their ideas. So, you know, there's no doubt that the market is hot and there's a tremendous amount of consumer demand. And in the southern half of the United States, there's more growth than there is supply. And so it creates this need to build. And, you know, you innovate because of necessity, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. And whether it is you're bottlenecked because all of your competitors are using the same materials and there's a commodity bottleneck because there's an evolution in consumers' expectations, there's an opportunity to build better. You know, all of those drive activities and innovation. And let's, you know, the big elephant in the room is the evolution of the workforce requires us to innovate in order to continue to deliver products to our consumers at the pace and the quality that they expect. So innovation is, as I've always thought about it, is what does it look like to be relevant in the future? And I can tell you for sure that a home builder is not going to look like they do today in the very, very near future in order to be relevant.
Great way to kick things off. Corey, you're back with us. What are your thoughts on this front?
I'm back. Can you hear me okay now?
Yep.
All right. Sorry, internet here at the hotel has not been great apparently. Unfortunately, I missed everything CR said, so I don't want to repeat what he said. But I think, you know, taking a different approach to some of the challenges, I'm sure CR went into some innovation conversations. Him and I have talked obviously a lot about that. I think just going even to a higher level, it's how do we increase labor supply into the space and creating a culture around, you know, really good entry-level job growth and really bringing innovation to the culture of the building industry and the trades, and how do we really scale and help grow all of the trade business? Because I think there's a pending significant shortage over time, especially in labor trades. And so I think my perspective on that, trying to be different than what everybody else's perspective that we've talked through, is taking a step up above that and how we solve labor shortage issues, in addition to continue to innovate and solve supply chain issues.
Absolutely. And when we've been talking about supply chain, a lot of people have been saying they consider labor a key part of the supply chain. Obviously, it's a component to get what you need to get done in addition to certainly materials.
Yep.
Thoughts on that front from Michael?
Yeah, so I second much of what CR and Corey both said, but and that's really what we have done is you know, we've been very focused on, you know, now is a great time to become innovative. You know, unfortunately, as builders, you typically, you know, you wait to do that. You become very relaxed when the market is good and you're not forward thinking until the market turns bad. So for us, you know, that's always been a thing, and obviously where synergy came from, you know, utilizing late gauge steel in lieu of lumber for a number of different reasons, but supply, thinking forward, being innovative in the thoughts of, you know, how do we reduce cost, but how do we attack the labor shortage that we have today? How do we create better buildings more efficiently that can be put together during vertical construction while we're attacking the lack of labor force that's out there? So, you know, now obviously is a great time because of the tightening supply, the high demand, and the many issues that we face in the construction industry. always a good time to innovate. And I think the biggest learning lesson and thing that we're going to come out of this market with today is stop waiting around till the market turns sour before you start to become and thinking creatively and innovatively about your structures.
Blake, what are your thoughts on this front?
You know, we work a lot, obviously, with the builders. I mean, I think one of the things that's a challenge to innovation is just changing the mindset of builders from moving away from, you know, contemporary materials and methods of construction. In addition to just the labor supply shortage, it's really the skill set of labor as well. We've had experiences of bringing in new technologies or new methodologies that were difficult to implement just because of the difficulties in the field for implementation. Requires a lot of training, a lot of coordinating with people, boots on the ground to make that happen. You know, and cost is always a factor for sure. Both the cost of innovation limits some of the smaller shops and their creative ideas getting to market. And I think, you know, cost of end product as well. I mean, builders, at least a lot of the builders that we work with a lot of the large tract home builders, very, very cost sensitive. So that's always a factor. So.
And last but not least on this front, Rich, before we dig into some of the more round table discussion today.
Sure. Yeah, I think, you know, kind of tying in with what's been said is actually training both the field staff of the builder and the labor themselves. You know, I've seen, you know, good innovations in kind of the incubator stage kind of wither and die because they don't put the resources in, you know, training those on how to use it, investing in just that documentation, being very clear. There's always this, I think it comes from the legal perspective of not being too explicit on how to do something, but the more explicit you can be with your expectations, if you're a product manufacturer, if you're a supplier, then you're going to get more out of that. And that goes to the code inspectors. It goes to really everybody in the process needs to truly understand your position and your path forward to kind of row together to that common goal.
Okay, so we've got questions in a couple of areas as conversation starters, and one is certainly focusing on product and material shortages and price swings that have happened, impacting delivery times, cost, and a number of other factors. So with the way the volatility of the supply chain over the last 16, 18 months, how has that changed the way that you, or if you're dealing with clients, are doing business in the short term, as well as your plans for the future? I know that's a broad one, but anyone can jump in on that at any time. Thoughts, Michael?
I'll jump in. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, our company is based on, utilizing everything differently, right? Technology, different materials. Our business has changed because we still rely on sheathing and roof sheathing and subfloor. But the biggest thing that we found is collaboration with our clients. I think that when you are facing some of the things that you're facing today in the market, you have to change the way you're doing business. You have to think differently, attack it together, yourself and your client. If you're going to walk out there together and try to put together a structure, a community, or project, oftentimes in the past it was, okay, you do and I do, and then together it'll end up being great. But today you got to walk next to each other. You got to figure out that path. You got to work in collaboration, not just with them, but their trade partners, their additional suppliers, and so I think as an industry, I think we have to become, I guess, friendlier would be a better way to do it. Conversations like we're having today. How do we get together and make the project better? How can we put our buying power together? How can we put our resources together to make a better project profitable for everybody?
Yeah, I definitely want to underscore that. I think that in any constrained environment like we're in right now with the supply chain and the labor chain issues we've got, you've got to think on both ends of the expectations, right? You have to be better at partnering with your suppliers and trades to understand their constraints, to have clear expectations about what you can and can't do and what the time schedule looks like, and how to create those synergies, right? Those win-win partnerships. And on the back end, right, that we've had to get proactive with our consumers. What we used to be able to do in 6 months, we somehow have to do in 9 months. And it's a great market to be in because of the pent-up demand. But if you're not challenging what your cycle times look like, if you're not resetting expectations, a big pivot we made in advance of this was, to go to much more spec product, right? So that we had the inventory in the ground and ready to go past these critical constraint points, so that we weren't having to go back to consumers and reset expectations because we're at drywall, or we have a warehouse full of appliances, or all the things that have put challenges on the ground to deliver homes. If they're already built, it's a lot easier to sell than to sell dirt right now. So I think that you see a lot of builders changing when they go to sales and when they go to market, and how they're setting those expectations for consumers.
Do you think, just as a follow-up to that, the lack of supply allows you more leverage with the consumers, where they're much happier to take the really still great new spec home than they are to maybe have the customization process, just because they know that they can get in that better home faster because it's a spec?
Yes and no, right? So there is the challenges are putting pricing challenges out there, so the consumers never like that part of it. I think every market is hot enough that they've seen really significant price appreciation, and then even there's a lot of builders that they sold 9 months ago and sold before a lot of the direct cost changes. So it's been a very challenging market on the top and bottom line for consumers and for companies and their profitability. And then the other piece is the market is hot and consumers will accept less. And that's probably not the message we want, right? The whole point of innovation and doing better with our supply chain, doing better with our labor, is about improving and resetting to a better standard, to use this as an opportunity to, what Corey's trying to do, right? Reset what a great home looks like, so consumers don't accept some of the compromises they've had to do for the last 30 years.
And just to piggyback on that, I think that's also comes into play when you set the expectation on the front end with the consumer, in what we really do and what they can really expect from us. And as well as, we touched on the supply chain and setting those expectations, but it's like any good management, right? Any kind of industry, any company, it's setting expectation up front and keeping your word. And when you can't keep your word because of things outside of your control, communicating as quickly as you can, even when it's bad news, and treating everyone from top to bottom with respect and with transparency. And I think that's what's going to continue to set certain companies apart from others, right? And that's what's helped us continue to acquire trades and scale up our trade base, is our transparency and our focus on taking care of them like a customer.
Now, when you say acquire trades, do you mean as partners, or are you actually acquiring the trades?
Both, but I was just referring to bringing them in as partners, not acquiring their companies. But yes, we're in the process of both.
Okay, great. And someone asked a clarifying question, Mark Irvin did, on who is the individual that builds to rent and with SIPs. And you were in the single family rental space. Are you doing build for rent currently?
So I'm actually sitting right now in Miami at the largest single family conference of the year. It's called IMN. And so the answer is I'm still extremely plugged into the space. All the institutions, would love for us to build for them. Currently, we are not focused on build for rent. We are focused very much on taking to the consumer market, but 100% part of our strategy next year we'll start kind of Q2 to Q3 back heavy into build for rent. with selective partners who are, focused and have the same worldview that we do.
And also, but if you are looking for an alternative solution build for rent, you might have gotten signals crossed with our introduction to Michael at Synergy Steel, because they do have a turnkey solution for build to rent, or build for rent. So thanks for that. Let's step back for a minute and talk about just in general use of materials, because you use SIPs. Michael talked about steel. We're still a predominantly site-based stick built industry. I know a lot of people sitting in this panel today have looked at everything in the kitchen sink and are delivering some of those things as well. Certainly, Michael, you're on the steel side, and Corey, you're on the SIP side. And many of you are also looking at or using offsite construction. So there's a lot of that overlap of different materials, different construction methodologies. So what are you experimenting with? And or what are your clients experimenting with? Maybe we start with Blake on the engineering side, and then go to CR and Rich. And then I would love to hear the biggest struggle that we have when people talk about alternative materials is cost. So why might now be a good time for SIPs or for steel? So let's start first with what you're experimenting with and why, and what you think will stick. So Blake, what are your clients looking at the present time?
We've been challenged by all of our clients on two fronts. One, obviously with the material shortages, coming up with alternate solutions that they need right now, because homes that are in process and in queue and ready to go. And then as well, just with the rising costs, how do they reduce costs? And that's been a challenge. So from an engineering perspective, you have to be very, very creative, think outside the box. So on the lateral resisting system side of things, we've developed some strapping methodologies. And the challenge is using kind of off the shelf materials that you're not going to run out of supply of, because that's the big issue right now. So using just standard coil straps and things, and reinforcing the connection points and walls to just develop a new X-bracing wall system with a lot higher capacity than some of the prescriptive design that you get from some of the strap and clip suppliers. So we were able to deliver some of that and alleviate one on a cost basis, because the materials were very, very cheap, and a material basis. So just enabled builders to continue to build where they were in short supply of standard sheeting materials and things like that. So that's certainly one thing, but it's everything along those lines. Just really being flexible, working with a lot of this was said before, we're working with our builders very closely, and then on the training side to implement these new ideas, and just being flexible.
Yep. So CR, I know you've got a lot of little tinkering in your toolbox. What's got you excited, and what have you decided to bench because it just wasn't working out?
Yeah, the reality is there is dozens of things out there that if it was a blank sheet of paper you would build with besides dimensional lumber. SIPs, light gauge steel, insulated concrete forms. There's this cool little company called Mighty Building that is doing 3D printing structural plastics. So there is really, really significant innovation that is cost effective, better performing, is simple, has a lower demand on the labor profile, right? It's such a massive win. And the challenge is, as always, change, right? It's the impediment to the industry is that we're all really, really good at sticks and bricks. And the challenge isn't that there's not better, it's not cost effective, and it wouldn't be better on the labor pool. It's the entire labor pool, the entire supply chain, and the people that were successful at building home building companies did it all with sticks and bricks. And so the opportunity is honestly creating economies of scale, right? So creating enough runway so you can bring peripheral innovations to the market in a cost-effective way. And as we all talked about, we've got to either partner with suppliers and trades to give them that runway to act like a big supplier, to act like a big trade, to act like this is what they would execute or do what Corey's doing, right? Vertically integrate. So there's a lot of really cool ways to change, but ultimately change is the impediment. There is all sorts of whys to create new building assemblies because they're better, they're cheaper, they're easier. What we need to do is create enough trust and alignment in the industry to allow that change to move within the industry.
Absolutely. And I can't remember if it came up in our conversation or another conversation I was having, but just the amount of investment they might need to make as trades and new tools and the training that they need, and just to expect them to do that and make that investment when it's you who wants them to make the shift, might need to feel more like a partnership on that front.
Yeah, and I honestly strongly don't think it's that big of an investment. It's runway. It's we can't put a toe in and expect somebody to put in a $20 million plant and do $30 million of labor training and get put a $100 million business plan together for 2 pilot homes, right? We've got to give runway. So I don't think that it's something that you have to spend $100 million for nothing, but I think you have to spend $100 million with a partner that will give you sufficient starts to justify that investment. And when you do that, it's smart on both ends.
Mm-hmm.
So Rich, what are you seeing in terms of the bigger production builders that you work with, and change in how they're building and what CR is talking about in runway?
Yeah, I think it's kind of troubling the approach that builders are needing to take just based on necessity, just based on product availability, based on cost. We're not seeing them snap into some next generation technology. If they're anything, they might be taking the step back because that's what's available. We're seeing T-ply or thin profile sheathing being used in place of OSB because they could get it and it's cheaper, but the trades are used to wrapping everything with house wrap. So we see lots of mislaps and things like that. Just real fundamentals that are kind of slipping away. Even with builders that have had established quality control programs, it's troubling to see it almost getting away from some people. And there's that kind of feeling like this is unprecedented. Let's just kind of get through it and move on. But kind of taking that approach and not trying to keep the train on the tracks, so to speak, could have some really long-term effects. I did a lot of forensic work in 2008, 9, 10 on all of those homes built in the very early 2000s when there was a lot being built and not a lot of oversight. So just knowing that it's going to pay off in the future to invest in quality assurance, I think is something that needs to be in everyone's mind.
So is it maybe an opportunity or a need to slow down? You mentioned CR 3 months becomes 6 months. Is it, is the cost benefit analysis slow down your delivery so that you don't end up with the risk issues? Because we might end up with the same level of risk issues we did after the boom, when you had more labor and you could put houses up and people wanted them really fast, and you didn't find out that there were issues until 5 years later. And what's the total cost there? So are you guys, as you're looking at quality management, are you thinking about that in terms of advocating for and chatting with your clients on that front? Nope. So let's go over to Michael and Corey in terms of materials. So we've been talking about what we've been doing with existing materials, and that change is hard. But why are you guys focused on, why did you move to steel? Why did you move to SIPs? And for those clients that you're working with, what would your argument be that this might be the right time to consider those strategies and consider investing in the change management process?
So, and Corey, if you don't mind, I'll jump in there on that one. To go back to our the material that we're using, when you review what it is that you're doing, you know, when you're putting together performas to construct homes or buildings, townhomes, and you're putting together budgets to go and repair them within the first year, you know, that's the driving force at the end of the day. There's got to be better materials. There's got to be more cost-effective ways to put together better structures in any market, whether it's a challenging market or if it's a soaring market, right? And so that's really what drove us to Synergy Steel, and everything that we do with that particular material is allowing us to build buildings stronger, you know, longer spans, be innovative in our design as we are making and creating and designing those buildings to be more efficient for all the men and women that are touching it and having a part of constructing it. Just besides that, but then we took it also to doing all nothing but panelization, and again too, that's creating, you know, efforts towards the labor shortage. It's reducing waste. It's building things in a controlled environment so that you're still putting a quality product out there, you know, not having to go back in and do drywall touch-ups after 10 months because, you know, things have what we would call settled, or in the terms that we like to use, acclimated to the temperatures that you're keeping them at. And now we have to go in and worry about bowed studs and misaligned areas of the house that have shrunk. You know, that was our driving force at the very beginning, because again, there's always got to be a better way. And if you're thinking innovatively in a good market, you're ahead of those that are getting on board when the market, you know, becomes challenging. And that's really what drove us to the light gauge steel.
Corey, how about on your front with SIPs?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it was an innovation push, really, for high performance as much as it was a beneficial change financially. And so looking at SIPs, for me, it was about reducing the friction in both the labor pool and in the pieces of parts of a house. So the thesis was, the less parts we have, the less friction we have, the faster we can build, and so we can reduce cycle time. So my focus with my team has really been, how do we reduce cycle time? And so SIPs is a great way to do that, as far as the building envelope. And then the next piece is then, you know, offsite building as much as you can. So you're reducing the amount of friction that happens on site, and reducing, and the other piece we haven't really touched on, but I think that's also been helpful for us innovatively is using BIM technology to really eliminate waste and eliminate challenges on the front end, so we can build the house digitally and be as efficient as we can when we finally deliver a kit on site.
So you're delivering affordable homes using SIPs.
Correct.
That are zero energy ready. We had a question come in, which, you know, we're starting to look at on the Alliance on ESG. So what's your carbon footprint? How is that factoring into what you're doing at Bettr Homes and with SI panels?
So it's definitely top of mind for us. Definitely part of our triple bottom line approach is, you know, starting with the people, and then planet is right there above profit. So I think it's a challenging thing, and you know, CR and others in the ESG space, we'll call it, building space, have had a lot of discussion around how you measure that carbon footprint. But it's definitely a focus for us. And so for us, it's really started with the easier part of it is to just reduce energy consumption, right? And then to pay attention to what we're doing in our own subdivisions, what we're doing, how we're paying attention to our own use of carbon, right? Our own carbon footprint. But I think we're seeing some evolution, and I think CR could jump in and speak to this even in more detail around how we track our carbon footprint and have carbon credits that are actually meaningful. And, you know, there's a lot of kind of BS around some of the carbon stuff. And then there's some actual like measurements that are meaningful. And I think that's really, you know, CR has really led the charge in the industry of how we start to measure and what that really looks like from a building science perspective. So, but it's very top of mind for us, and it's something that we pay attention to and that we're very focused on, especially over a 5-year plan, is really getting to minimum carbon neutral.
Okay. Any thoughts on that front, CR?
Yeah, I mean, just rounding that out, the big conversation Corey and I have been having in parallel to this discussion is what are the drivers of change, right? It's always it's better to be the agent of your own change than have change done to you. And if you look at, you know, the massive multi-trillion dollars of cost that are lost to the inefficiency of the grid, our industry has evolved to be pretty efficient, right? The energy efficiency, the US EPA and the DOE have these great cookbooks for building energy efficient envelopes now. And what is been happening is the stakeholders are expanding, right? The utility players, the waste, the mixed use and the push politically and environmentally to reduce carbon. These are the new things that are coming into our sphere of influence that are really driving the next 10 years of expectations. And so as carbon accounting comes in and as mixed fuels, there's a lot of pressure to go to all electric, which are overlapping issues, right? There's a tremendous need for our industry to get out in front of it before dumb policies are written that really subject us to requirements that are a bunch of work without actually generating a lot of benefit. And so, you know, Sam Rashkin and Corey and myself and you know, people at IBACOS and there's all sorts of stakeholders that are getting together and aligning so that we can put together an approach that says this is a pragmatic way that our industry code can contribute to the benefit of society. And this is the way we should be measured and managed so that we don't get something, you know, from a textile plant that tries to get forced into a different industry that doesn't make any sense to us.
So in essence, you're trying to create a checklist for what you think that ideal ESG policy would be for you and head it off at the pass with the industry.
I think we've got to. I mean, unfortunately, ESG is out of the barn, right? We are a low carbon industry as far as, you know, comparing us to electric plants and, you know, automotive manufacturing and you know, heavy industry. So all those industries have created these policies and they're trying to get those square pegs into our round hole. And we need to get out in front of it and create good, rational discourse around what it is that we can impact and what we should be prioritizing to participate in the discussion instead of spending a tremendous amount of industry not actually achieving the goals of ESG. So I'm naively hoping we're going to rationally influence policy.
Any further comments on that front? There was a question and a comment to you, Corey, and I think this is a good question for everyone. Let me see, where did that go? It was to you and CR initially, but I think this is a good question for everyone. What's your checklist or priority for carrying forward a new innovation? Like, what are the stage gates you think people should look at? Kind of process should they go through before they make a big change?
Yeah, I think CR jumped in with a pretty good answer to start the discussion, you know, with all of us. So if you want to, CR, jump in on that.
Yeah, I'll do philosophy, Corey, and then you take the pragmatic.
You got
it. So the
it.
philosophy is quite honestly, is that hard, unabashed look is what is it going to be to be relevant in this industry in a decade? And I don't think anybody can look at what the needs are of our country and the current configuration of the way a typical home builder goes to market as viable. And so that creates this pressure to say change is a requirement in order to keep your business a part of the future and keep your employees well employed and be a viable business going forward. So I think at its core, it becomes this really pragmatic, hey, what are the opportunities? What are the demand? What is the idealistic opportunity we could be? And once that's known by the average consumer, the consumer is going to push us in that direction. Municipalities and codes are going to push us in that direction. And we either adapt and survive or we don't. And so there's a lot of really pragmatic point, but that triple bottom line is a really important thought in, the social license to operate and what it's going to take to get building permits and to build to the evolving code, but also to retain trades and employees in a competitive environment. So there's a lot more than just hugging a tree and feeling good about yourself to do a triple bottom line approach to business.
For sure. Yeah, so I would just add, I just had this discussion earlier this morning with some large capital groups around innovation, and the pragmatic side is, for a production home builder, it's what's scalable as well, right? It's not just what's the great innovation, because there's a ton of great innovation out there, but how much of it can we implement and scale alongside of doing the right thing, and how much of it can we partner with companies that have great ideas, but in order to take them to market, it's got to be scalable, and we have to be able to measure it in terms of economics. And we have to, it's obviously a pretty broad question, starting, from SIPs all the way through, completely revamping the thought process from building from the ground up. And that's kind of how we've tried to approach this year, is how do we kind of rip everything out that's traditional and start with what's the best practices and what's going to carry us through the next 10 years and forward. And then how do we really scale that? So long-winded answer, but I think it's, along with what CR said, it's also looking at innovative ideas that are scalable if you're in production, right? If you're not in production, it's a different conversation. But for those of us that are really focused on scale and production, taking a great idea and making sure that it's practical and helping it get there is really where we've been.
Any additional thoughts, Rich, on how you would advise clients on the production building side?
I think it's getting that buy-in, and I think there was a question similar about educating people, getting local permit officials involved. Sometimes it might just be getting one contractor, the one forward-thinking, fill in the blank, framer, mechanical contractor, whoever it may be, to really kind of get on board with you. You don't have to change the whole market that you're in kind of all at once. There are very sophisticated trade contractors. They might not be the biggest one in town, they might not be the cheapest one, but they're willing to, if they see a good idea, let them in kind of on the ground floor and be there with you to go to the code official and say, I think that this, here's all of our documentation. Here's our, evaluation service report. Here's all of, we've got all the ducks in a row, and I want to do this. It's much better than just having the manufacturer try to kind of shove it down either a trade contractors or a code officials throughout.
So Rich, that's a really great point too, because that is the top off all of that conversation. The second your notion there is education to individuals who have to work with that innovative product or that new thing. For all of us in construction, we have to get uncomfortable before we start to understand and reap the benefits of change and innovation. And we have to get the knowledge. To Rich's point too, you cannot just bring a new product, especially in the production industry, and just put it in front of somebody and say, this is going to be great and it's going to make all of our lives better, right? You have to help educate them, help kind of guide folks down that path to understand how that's going to be beneficial to them and how it's scalable, not just for the contractor, but for them themselves, right? And for their companies, and how that's going to work to make them more efficient in the process of owning their company and working for builders alike.
We're looking for, we're looking at labor on our side, and, what are the training programs that are out there? What are the new skill sets that are needed in the workforce moving forward, with materials that we have, with incorporating offsite construction? How have the jobs changed for trade contractors in the field? How do they get up and running and familiar with BIM? So is there anything that you guys are doing from a trade and from a training and partnership program, either yourselves or, to your point, partnering with your manufacturers or, or others to bring some of that training to light, to give them the skill sets that they're looking for. Anything you guys have going on or needs that you think that there are in the industry on that front?
I think the big issue there is it's better, and you have to create enough carrots to bring everybody along. So whether you've got your bid documents 3D'd out, and so that you've got a much more clear takeoff analysis, your trades can bid competitively without a lot of risk. Whether it's not your QA program, it ties in and feeds back into your procurement systems for payment and starts analysis, right? So the great thing about BIM, BOM, and 3D architecture is to integrate your trades to make their jobs easier. And without that, it's just more work, right? So it's always the why you're doing what you do. Whenever we roll out an innovation, we try to pull in everybody that's affected to make sure that they understand why getting through that change, which is always going to be difficult, the other side is better for them. And if you're not explaining the why, the what becomes really tough.
So maybe that's the second. First, you internally make sure that the thing is going to be scalable for you and it's going to make sense. And the second thing that you're doing is the education of your partners to bring them along and show them what the win-win would be. And, even if in the short term you have to take you think the offsite construction, the panels are going to be less expensive, or you think they're going to be easier to install, you might have to take a hit with the installers so that they can see that that's actually the case.
Yep.
And it's not just lip service.
Yep.
Anybody else on that front? Any thoughts on training opportunities, partnership, things that you are doing or things that you think need to happen to help the labor force adopt innovation?
I think you need to work, the parallel paths as the innovation, whatever it may be, kind of passes that first stage gate, that it might have some legs, working on all of those elements together. You're developing the technology, but you're also developing the training material and the cost story at the same time. Don't let kind of one, get way out of line from the other. That's what I've seen, the successful innovations that have come out of IBACOS have those kind of three things all going, at the same time. And that maybe that means it takes a little bit longer, but then when it gets there, it's got kind of the slam dunk cost story. It's got the training resources, both people and digital, physical training materials. And, the technology can kind of speak for itself.
So there's a question here from Hanny, which CR kind of commented on back a bit, but SIPs and steel panels are an assembly of traditional construction. Is anyone looking at other methods like 3D printing, outsourcing? What is keeping you from jumping into those methods? So what's keeping you from changing? You mentioned mighty buildings. CR.
Yeah, so the chat that we're having is there's some really significant innovation happening in the peripheral, whether it's phase change materials or the evolution of 3D printing or some of the Asian building practices that look like they're going to come to North America soon. Great stuff. The challenge is availability, right? So there's definitely a cart and a horse in our industry, and better is great as an idea, but if you don't distill it down into an available pragmatic building solution that's shovel ready, it's just a great idea. So all of these innovations have to come to market in a way that a small custom builder, a regional builder, or a national builder like myself can utilize them. So 3D printing, for example, while it's really cool, is absolutely not ready for prime time yet. I looked at the first 3D printed house in Tempe last month, and it's really cool. And I don't want to talk smack, but concrete is not a good weather barrier. It's not a good insulation. It's structural. It's the coolest coil pot house I've ever seen. But by the time you then go and layer insulation and weather barriers and trade the trades, it's not ready. Will I have a different opinion on that in 5 years? Hell yeah, I will be. I'll be wanting a 3D printed house for 5 years. But the challenge is always providing an opportunity for that technology to scale into the market. And the honest answer is our industry sucks at investing in R&D, right? I mean, I think Crest toothpaste spends more in R&D than the entire housing industry combined, and that's a little sad.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that a little bit, CR. I think that's going to change too. I think, we're seeing large capital who's starting to pay a lot of attention to not just prop tech, but also to innovation. And so I think if we're not evolving and we're not looking for innovation every day and what's coming and paying attention to it, there's going to be R&D that's showing up, and we've got to pay attention and we've got to be out ahead of it and know what's going on and be in the world like you are every day looking at that innovation, because we can help the innovation or we can lose to it. And that's really kind of how I'm looking at it.
I agree with that without 1,000%.
Yep.
Anyone else? Any thoughts on that front? There's also a question that, oh, did you, Michael?
No, we're
You
good.
unmuted yourself. Okay. There's a question here: who should be in charge of the education of our workforce, and who can afford to do this? So any thoughts on education? Rich?
If you're a big builder, I think that you need to take control of that as much as you can, because you have resources are always going to be tight, but we're seeing big builders almost begging for training. They're willing to invest the money now, and it's always that reactive approach where now we've got more demand than we could imagine and not the labor to do it. But I think that big builders can really drive the ship, so to speak, on that. And then there's other groups that like the Leading Builders of America's Building Talent Foundation. I know that there's you may even know more than me on this, but I know that there's some local colleges and stuff that have really started to build up their programs with trade school approach. So it's going to take a lot of different avenues kind of coming together to to try to address this challenge. But yeah, I think that it's going to take a lot of different efforts. I don't think it's one source, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
we
Blake,
stay very
thoughts on
focused
this front? Oh.
Yeah, we stay very focused on that. I mean, the generations today are they're not coming out to be framers and electricians and plumbers, and when you start to introduce things like Revit and the BIM technology and platforms and how we are actually constructing homes differently and innovatively and the use of technology, I think that starts to help a lot with the younger generation who is very geared towards that virtual building or that electronic communication, that they start to see it differently. And I think, the industry as a whole has to do that, but in big builders or even for manufacturers and turnkey providers like us, teaming up with that local area, those local trade schools, and speaking to those individuals who, really are looking for that opportunity is extremely important. And so that is something that has always been a big focus for us, knowing that, if we don't continue to go out there and educate and show that we are different today than we were when our grandfathers were doing it, we're going to lose those generations, and we don't want to do that today.
So Blake, any thoughts on your front? I mean, you've got the structural engineering background, and certainly you have to kind of certify that something's going to stand the test of time. But what role are you playing in, helping your clients take those strategies to market? And what other insights do you have on the educating the workforce front?
Yeah, I don't think it can be understated how important the downstream training is going to be. I know that there's a lot of upfront time spent on the new technologies and scalability of those, but I mean, the downstream piece is going to be just as important once we have those technologies in play. Engineers are going to play a very vital role. We're the ones that get, builders get challenged by city officials on new technologies all the time, and they just turn to the engineer and say, "You got to solve this problem for me." So we've got to definitely be in the loop on all the technologies and any of the resources that are published with regards to those ICC reports and all that kind of stuff. But beyond that, I think a lot of the manufacturers of the new technologies are probably going to have to get people out in the field to do training with the builders. I mean, I don't think that the builders are going to take it on themselves completely to make sure that they're trained on these things. It's going to take a huge effort, through that whole downstream to make sure that the implementation goes smoothly, and that it's scalable to the volume that's necessary. I know that some of our clients, they put a lot of homes in the ground. I mean, we'll probably do close to 50,000 homes this year out of our firm. And so we would have to train all of our inspection staff. A lot of cities, municipalities take on the inspection, responsibilities themselves, but a lot of the markets that we're dealing with, I mean, we take on that responsibility in conjunction with the cities. So it's training all of those people on these new technologies. And I think that the engineering community will have to step up to that. And I think they will. I don't think that's going to be an issue, but I don't think it can be understated how important that part is going to be. So.
Yeah, and I agree with everything said, but there's a lot of people on this call, and I just need to make one point of caution, which is I see people trying to double down on the status quo. And I think that's really dangerous, right? Let's not train for what we built in '74. I don't want to burn a bunch of time and effort making people good at shaping wagon wheels. Like, we've got to anticipate and guide our own future, and then train a workforce towards that. I'm just really concerned about some of the rhetoric I've seen in our own industry, which just put our head in the sand and keep people putting nails in 2x4s. And I think that's a really unwise way to inspire people to come into our industry, but also it isn't going to work, right? If we're not creating exciting jobs for people that are going to be relevant for our kids, we're not doing this right.
Well, and you don't want to teach somebody how to build a wagon wheel that then 5 years from now is not relevant. So they spent this time and invested in this education that's not worth anything, and they're no longer marketable. And that's something that we've been talking about on the labor side. We need a bigger pipeline of people, but we need to redefine what the jobs to be done are, so that when we're bringing them in and we're training them to be successful for the longer term, not to solve an immediate bleed in the industry. So
yeah, it's really showing them a path forward, right? It's not just teaching them one trade, but it's showing them a path, the whole path forward, and what the story looks like, and changing the culture in general, right? To even looking at, if you're looking at millennials and Gen Zers as being your future workforce and your current workforce, how do you speak to them where they are? And it's definitely with innovation. I mean, that's what gets that, my opinion, that's what gets them excited. Mm-hmm. And then creating a culture that it is totally acceptable by mom and dad to be in the trade industry, to be in the building industry, because it's cool and it's great and it's doing something better for the world, rather than, if you don't go to college and become a doctor, you're not acceptable, right? So it's a cultural shift, I think, even at the parenting level, but certainly in our industry, where we can have an effect on that.
Well, and it's also a balance of how much debt do you take on to make money? How fast can you make money, in addition to doing the right thing? I think people totally discount the career opportunities and the financial viability of being in our industry.
Completely. And majority of people coming out of college today are getting an entry-level job that doesn't pay any more than an entry-level construction position in the trades would pay. But they have aspirations of a different upside. And I think we just need to provide that upside to the trades as well. Mm-hmm. And make try to make a shift and a cultural change there.
So I have a time check for everyone. It's 1:53. We are going until 3:15 Eastern. But I want to make sure for those of you who are jumping off to go to another meeting, or for whatever reason, that we share a couple of things with you first. Thank you to our partners, many of whom are listening in today or will be watching the archive, for making this kind of discussion possible, and making the Alliance possible. So thank you for your insights and your support. And Paige, next one. And then up next, we have several things going on. So here's just a couple of images. We're launching a brand new website within the next 2 weeks. So the event that you're attending today, moving forward, you'll be able to get the details of our events on one tab, the attend, so you actually participate live or register on another tab. And then the recap will be right there. So everything related to an event will be in one area for you. So we'll do that for this event. And you would just be able to click on that watch button to actually watch the archive. And we'll share our recap notes with you that way moving forward. We also, next month, shout out to the RNN folks from RNN Architects on the phone, are going to be co-hosting an event with them and HUD that's part snapshot panels with experts looking at education and risk and fragmentation in the industry, and behavioral issues and biases that would prevent us from innovating and delivering more attainable housing. So it's that attainable housing bent. It is not HUD code housing, it's attainable market rate housing, looking at solutions from that perspective. We're going to do it as a two-parter, August 17th and 19th from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern. It's open and free to all. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that and join us for that as well. And not on the screen, but you'll be getting some more information shortly. We are expanding our partnership with the Energy and Environmental Building Alliance. We're doing joint memberships where we are actually making it more cost effective for you, if you're a current member, to join the other organization or to join both at a discounted rate. And for their summit in September, we're going to be co-hosting an event at Thrive Homebuilders. That's a networking event. And we're actually hosting a panel. So quite a bit of what they're doing overlaps, but they're more building science focused than we are at EBA. With what we do focused on the production building side, but we're going to be co-hosting one of their panel discussion, or one of their tracks, I should say, on Wednesday of EBA's conference. So look for more details on that front coming from Natalie and the team in the next couple of weeks. So I've got a closing question for you, but I want to make sure that we address one of these other questions that's been hanging out in here. Let's see. Oh, I lost it. If I lost your question, type it in for me. But I'd like to, maybe we'll jump into this last big one because it's a biggie. So if we look ahead, I'm borrowing this from George Casey. He did this a couple months ago. Before the supply chain got really bad and mucked up in terms of product availability and cost, he posed a question looking forward to December 31st of 2029. So from each of your perspectives, if you look back over the past decade, how has the supply chain for production housing changed? Who are the players? And how have material and construction practices evolved? So what do you think it should be like in 2029? And that's just another turn of the decade. Thoughts on that front? CR.
Yeah, I think the two big things that will happen is there's going to be a bifurcation in the industry that's more significant than there is today. Today, there's this nice continuum from entry level through move up, through luxury, through custom. And I think what's going to happen is, out of necessity, the affordable through move up is going to become more simple. I think you're going to see much more consistency, much more repeatability in order to have homes fit better into a manufacturing manufacturing mindset. So I think you're going to see those price point homes, coalesce, which I think is a really good thing. I think there's an unnecessary amount of chaos and manipulation going on in that part of the market. And then I think you're going to get a gap, and then there's going to be high-end, crazy, do-what-you-want-to customs. But I think just kind of like, economics, we've lost a bit of the upper middle class in America. I think you're going to see the same thing happening in housing, where you get a simple, repeatable, efficient, value-driven main core, and then kind of crazy luxury stuff up top, and not much between those.
So Rich, what do you think in terms of the materials and construction practices, the supply chain, and who the players are, and what we're doing with labor? Any thoughts on supply chain 2029?
I think we'll see, consolidation of major, builders and their trades, not doing more than just one thing. I think that, those that do more of a turnkey approach or more of a vertically integrated approach, I think are going to, to stand out, assuming that they're, you can never assume, but, depending on, what the economy does, if it's relatively stable, that will be those that have done that will I think benefit a great deal from that, because there's more consistency in that. And that's what, working with large builders, that is their, the biggest thing that we're trying to help them drive towards is consistency. And when you have more control over the process, you can be more consistent.
Michael, thoughts on this front?
Yeah, I say that, looking back, I think technology is going to really be the stronghold in the separator in the industry. It's what's going to continue to press us forward in all the aspects that we're talking about today. When we look at materials and construction practices, getting lean. I think every day the things that we're doing is bringing to the environment, to the industry itself, just less waste by better planning up front, by utilization of technology to virtually create that building or that project first, so that we're controlling those aspects that in the past we never did. And so making it a better environment. The labor force is always going to be, what it is that we're going to look to fight through. And going back to the original question that was asked earlier, who's it up to educate these individuals? I really don't think it's up to any one person. I think it's up to all of us. All of us who are passionate about what we do and taking this all to the next level and taking the time to be innovative and creative and make the industry better and looked at differently. It's going to take all of us to help create that labor force. So I definitely think technology, more offsite construction, to CR's point, more of a manufacturing mentality to get it out there, to be more efficient in vertical construction and reduce cycle time. I think those are all the things that when we look back over the 10 years, if it's 2029 right now, we're going to look back and say that was our focus, and that's where we are today.
So if you're saying offsite and we're at what, 10% now, where are we percentage wise? How much more do you think of housing product by 2029 will be built using offsite methodologies or panelized construction or modules or what have you?
Yeah, and I think we're just scratching the surface with putting together panels, wall panels today, and trusses. I think the evolution is how much more can you do off-site and bring to the site, just to put it in place. Almost a plug and play. A lot of the things that we see today, the cubes that they're developing, the prefab manufacturing of having the mechanicals in place prior to vertical construction. I think all of those things are going to continue to drive forward. So I think we're just scratching the surface today.
Yep. Blake or Corey, thoughts on this front?
You know, I think innovation and new technology obviously going to drive things, but I think a huge driver and a disruptor to the current system of things is going to be the energy changes to the energy code, the energy requirements. I think is going to force builders to look at different things. It's going to force people to come up with new materials. I think SIP systems is obviously very viable in that, and I think you know, as you adopt new technologies as well, as the more you can do things off-site and make your assembly process simpler in the field and require less labor in the field, I think the better off you're going to be. So I think, you know, those people that innovate with those kind of systems, and then, you know, link that with more energy efficient homes to satisfy, you know, new changes to the code. I think they're going to be the big winners in this for sure.
And Corey?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's kind of done a great job of looking at it and explaining. I think that it's really going to come to staying ahead and really paying attention to the innovation and what's happening in the scale. But I don't have a lot to add to what everybody else has already mentioned. I think it's all has all made sense and is all very valid.
I have one last plug for you guys. As part of the labor working group that we have, where we've decided that our focus is really building the pipeline. So for those of you who've seen our offsite construction heat map, we think one of the things that's lacking in the industry is visibility into the educational programs that are available and what level of time investment or money might be involved, and making kind of a one-stop shop for those resources. So our intent is to create a map, a clickable map of the US that charts what all of the training opportunities are. And then actually also create a bit of a messaging document that allows us to connect our group, members of the Alliance, people who are looking for labor or are passionate about building the workforce, with the messages they might want, as well as the institutions they might connect with to help us get people into the industry. So as a follow-up, when we send you the link to this event for more information, we'll also send you a link to our training and development map, is what we're calling it. But we think that if you don't know how to go about getting educated in the industry, and you don't know the value of being part of the industry, that we're not going to be able to attract the people that we need. So I would encourage all of you to take a look at that, because I think you all offer something. You're probably partnering with people that we should be talking to. And would love any insights or feedback you guys have on that front.
Yeah, I got a bunch of thoughts about that, Betsy. Let's talk after this, but I think one of the big things that we should be capturing and disseminating is all of the trades and all of the builders and all the suppliers that would take unskilled people and train them to do jobs. I think that's a massive existing pool that people just don't know how to plug into.
Yep, absolutely. Would love to talk to you about that. All right, well, we are just a couple minutes before 3:15. Wanted to thank everyone for participating, for your insights today, for the nice chatter we had going along the side. But we've been taking notes, and we'll be pulling some video clips from today's session and posting the full archive, as well as kind of highlighting some of the higher points and a recap from what we did. But thank you to all of you guys for sharing your perspectives, and to everybody for being active participants today. And have a great rest of your afternoon. We hope to connect with you again soon.
Thanks, Betsy.
Thank you.
Great talking to you guys.
Thanks, Betsy. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Take care.
You too.